Good evening, everybody. We talked about the nature of mind 2 classes ago, and this class is about supply, and the next class will be about healing, and these are 2 good opportunities for us to get a practical insight into what that class about the nature of mind really was all about. And then I think we'll do one more class. We'll do this class, and then we'll do supply next time, and then we'll do one more class after that, which will be primarily for questions and answers. So take your time and think about questions and bring them, write them down if you want to, or whatever. If you want to write them down and hand them to me so that you don't have to ask them in class, that's cool. If you want to ask them in class, that's fine. So we'll do the 7th class will be questions and answers and maybe some spiritual principles. This class, or classes like this, have usually been called the nature of spiritual supply. But I was meditating about an hour ago and I realized that's wrong. It should be called the spiritual nature of supply. And I hope by the end of this class that you will see why that's true. We have a real clear sense about spiritual and material as being so different. And in fact, everything is spiritual. But we'll get to that later. I want to start out with a mathematics lesson. Teach you about multiplication and division. The nature of the material world is one of division, and the nature of the spiritual world is one of multiplication. And this is the crux of the principle of supply. If you know that when I say spiritual, I also mean in consciousness, or the stuff that's non-material. Spiritual is a generic term, but we can talk about consciousness. If you think about things material, if I want to share $1 with you, I have to divide it. And you get 50 cents and I get 50 cents, or some such division, and then we decide to share it further, and now everybody's got a quarter. And we want to share it further, and everybody's got a nickel. And the nature in the material world is divisive. And when we share, we divide. But think about all the things that are spiritual. Think about a mother with 2 kids. And she has a 3rd kid. Now she doesn't take the love that she has for the 2 kids and give each of those kids 1/3 of it, and give 1/3 of it to the other one. No, she just loves all 3. She gives all 3 of her kids all her love. It multiplied. And it's a principle we know very well in AA. We call it, you got to give it away to keep it, which is also, by the way, a perfect paraphrase for this principle of supply. In AA, we know that we have to give it away to keep it, and we also know that the more we give away, the more we get. Those of us who sponsor know that, as we sponsor more and more people, we get more joy. Sponsoring multiplies our experience, not theirs necessarily. They may or may not get sober or get what they have, but giving away sponsorship grows our experience. If I want to share truth with you, it doesn't diminish my truth. It enhances it, if anything. But at least if I share my truth with you, then we both have all of the truth that I was able to share. Trust, faith, all these things, all the spiritual things multiply. They don't divide. And there's some very simple principles that you can immediately infer from this. My favorite principle is, if you want more love in your life, love more. And it's true, and you all know it's true. The more people you love, the more love there is in your life. And it's not the more people that love you that changes the amount of love in your life, because you never know whether they love you or not. You spend all your time in your head wondering whether they really love you. And, and the fact is that I never feel your love. I can't feel you. I see you do things that I interpret as loving, but I don't feel your love. I feel my love. I feel God's love coming through me. So if you want more love in your life, love more. If you need more companionship, become a companion. We know that's true. We can see that'll work if we ever had thought about it. If you want more friends, be a friend to more people. Okay? See how spiritual stuff multiplies. And we don't get diminished by loving more or being friendlier to more or more companionable to people. The interesting fact is that this also applies to material things. If you want more money, spend more, I'll say. That one's harder, isn't it? We'll get to that. Tonight. And as I said, in the material world, it's all very divisive, and you have to cut stuff up. If you think about, I love talking about Jesus because his stuff is so accessible, and because he was really such a great master. The words that he said are so true. So many of the quotations, the red parts of the gospel, the stuff that Jesus said is so true, not the interpretations. If you look at the time when he fed the multitudes, this is a classic example of supply. So Jesus is at the shore, and these 5,000 people are here, and they're miles from anywhere, and everybody's very hungry, and what am I going to do with these people? We've got to feed them. And he says, well, what do we have? And the answer is, well, we got 2 loaves of bread and 5 fish. And Jesus did not sit down and lay out the 2 loaves of bread and slice it into 2,500 slices each loaf, and take these fish and chop them into 1,000 pieces each and pass it around, okay? This was not how he fed the multitudes. This would be material feeding. My image of it is, I don't know what it looked like actually, but my image of it is that you put the loaf of bread in a sack, and you reach in and you tear off a piece, a nice chunk, and hand it to somebody. And then you reach in and you tear off a chunk and hand it to somebody. And they just wandered around, reaching in and tearing off a chunk and handing it to somebody. Okay? And it continued endlessly until everybody had a chunk. This is an example of multiplying things that appear to be material, as distinct from multiplying things we call spiritual. He proceeded to do that, I'm sure, with the fish as well. So each disciple had either a fish or a loaf of bread, and went around handing pieces to it. And their consciousness was that they knew there was enough. And the content of your consciousness is what is expressed in your life. So knowing there was enough, there was. Knowing there's more allowed them to reach in and pull off the next chunk and pass it out. I love this topic, and of course everybody's always very interested in supply. This is the hot one, but it is so difficult to express. You know, my mind wants to present this in a nice, logical, orderly manner, and of course there isn't one. You know, there is no logical sequence because this is contrary to all of material logic. But nonetheless, I will try to put some sequence on it. My favorite picture of supply is if I think of a pipe from God through me to out there. And let's stick with the spiritual pipe. When I love people, I know that I personally am incapable of loving, but I am incapable of expressing God's love, okay? So it's God's love that comes through me out to whoever I, so to speak, love, or whoever I share God's love with is a more precise way of saying that. So I think of it as a pipe from God through me out into the world. And what I can do is open the pipe wider and wider and let more and more love flow through me out to you. And as a result, there's a great deal more love in my experience. I'm becoming more and more filled with love as I let the more and more love flow through me. Okay? Now, I only got control of my end. God's end is infinite. I got control of my end, and I can let a little bit flow, or I can shut it off completely, or I can let as much flow as I want to, or as I'm capable of. As my consciousness grows, I'm able to let more and more love flow through me. God's end is infinite, so there's no way to stop that. I could have an infinite amount of love in my experience all the time if I were capable of maintaining that level of consciousness. Now let's turn around, though, and look at the flow the other way. Suppose I go out there and try to get love from you and shove it up my pipe, so to speak. What happens? What happens? The pipe clogs up. All flow stops. We got love coming this way, and we got love trying to go this way, and there's a complete stop. So the minute I try to get something from out there into me, nothing happens. So the next thing to think about supply is that supply is flow through me. One of my axioms is that supply is outflow, not income. Everybody thinks of supply as income. How much am I getting from my boss? How much am I getting from my job? How much am I getting from these people? And that sense of supply is very limiting, and it blocks the infinite flow. The sense of supply in the spiritual world, especially, that we are in touch with, is that we increase our flow outward, and we get more in our life. And the reason it seems to multiply, the reason that I'm able to love 5 people each as much as I can love one person, is not because I suddenly generate 5 times as much love. It's because I'm in touch with infinite amount of love, and there's 5 times as much flowing through me. Okay?
Say that again.
I said the reason that I can love 5 people, each of them as much as I can love one person, is because I'm not the one that's doing the loving. It's not my small finite person that's doing the loving. It is because I am a conduit for the love, and the amount of love that comes in is infinite, potentially. And so I'm able to love 5 people, each of them individually, as much as I'm able to love one person, or 10 people, or 100 people if I could do that. At some point, I limit it. I limit it. I'm the constrictor on the size of my pipe, not God. Like I said in the mind thing, I'm the limiter on the size of the funnel. God's end of the funnel is infinite. And it comes down into this spigot of the funnel through me, and that's what I limit by my consciousness. I was going somewhere with that. Any event, that's the reality of multiplying. The reality of multiplying is not really multiplying. The reality of multiplying is really the matter of realizing the infinity that exists, that is the nature of God, that is the nature of the omnipresence. There's one other Bible story that Joel uses to talk about supply that I like. And I don't know where it is. I don't think it's in the New Testament. It's probably in Isaiah or one of the prophets. The story is about a poor widow who's going to a wedding and is very distressed because she doesn't think she has anything to make a gift with. And the prophet, Isaiah or whoever it is, says to her, "Well, what do you have in your house?" And she says, "Nothing." And then she thinks a little bit and she says, "Well, I do have a few drops of oil." And he says, "Oh, show me that. Go get the thing." So she brings out this little thing, the little cruet that she has the oil in. And he says, "Pour." And so she starts pouring oil, a few drops of oil. And it pours, and it pours, and it pours, and it pours, and it pours endlessly. Now, this is the very clear picture of supply, and it's exactly the same picture as feeding the 5,000 with the loaves and fishes. In both cases, Jesus didn't say, "Well, we don't have anything." Jesus said, "What do we have?" And the prophet asked this poor widow, "What do you have?" And the process is beginning with what you have and letting it flow. Jesus says we have 5 loaves and 2 fish, or vice versa. And he doesn't focus on the 5 and the 2. He focuses on we have fish and we have bread. And so he proceeds to share that. So now we get to the nature, back to the material versus spiritual, the nature of mind, what we talked about 2 weeks ago in the nature of mind, you may recall, is that what we experience is the outpicturing of our own consciousness. We got that, I think, mostly. At least we heard the words. I don't know to what extent we got it, but the principle, the root principle, the fundamental principle of all metaphysics and mysticism is that my experience is an outpicturing of my own consciousness. So, what had to happen in the case of both the multitudes and the poor widow is that let's look at the widow, she was not allowed to come from the viewpoint of I have nothing, because if her consciousness contains the I have nothing, then the expression is that she has nothing. But the guy says, "Well, what do you have?" "Oh, I have oil." And now she's in the consciousness of something I have, and so that consciousness is what expresses. And the expression is the oil. All of supply, all of your experience, all of my experience of supply is determined by my attitude or my expectations of my supply. If I have a consciousness that there isn't enough, that consciousness will express, and there won't be enough. Just in the expectation or the feeling that there won't be enough, there won't be enough. If I think I'm going to lack, I'm going to lack. If, on the other hand, I think that I'm going to be taken care of, I will be taken care of. If I think there's enough, because my concept of enough is what expresses. And it will be enough for me, because it's my consciousness that's expressing enough, so it will express what's enough for me. If I think there's abundance, I will live in an abundant world. If I think the world is filled with love, the world will be filled with love. If I think the world is filled with God, I will find God everywhere I look. This is all the very fundamental stuff of supply. So it's so important to get the start somewhere, to move from the lack towards the abundance, because whatever consciousness you have is what you're experiencing, and of course the experience reinforces the consciousness. Yeah, I don't think there'll be enough. See, I told you there wasn't going to be enough.
Yeah.
It is how it happens, because it reflects back at you. We'll get into the practice of supply a little bit later. There are some things we can do to practice it, but there's one Joel story. And this is my favorite Joel story, because I swear I read this Joel story in one of Joel's books, or heard it on one of his tapes. And I heard the story, and it's very clear to me. And I have yet to meet anybody anywhere who has ever heard this or seen it. And I know lots of Infinite Way teachers and lots of people who listen to tapes, and I've re-listened to 250 tapes. I have no idea where I heard this, but it may have been my sense of supply creating this. But Joel says somewhere that if you really find that you have nothing in your house, steal something and give it away. Prime the pump. Get the flow going. Now, I wouldn't make up something like that and put it in Joel's mouth. So I'm sure he says that somewhere. But the point I want you to hear is the idea. Get the flow going. It's all about flow. It's all about outward flow. It's all about outflow. It's all about output. What does it say in the big book? About what we can put into the world rather than what we can get from it? Well, it's not a rather than. It's what I put into the world is what I will get from it. Okay? They were close. They have the right direction. Exactly what I put into the world is what I will get from it. If you can really get the sense of my experience is the reflection of the content of my consciousness. I know that sounds sort of mystical and weird, and if you're like I was with a teacher years ago, you're wondering, what does he really mean by that? Why doesn't he say what he really means? But I mean that literally. I mean that as literally as I can possibly mean it. My experience is the outpicturing of my own state of consciousness. And if you get that, or even if you're willing to accept it as a trial, then you realize that there's nothing out there. It's all the outpicturing of my consciousness. And the important thing with respect to this topic is that means there's no source out there. It's an effect. It's an effect of my consciousness. And in the areas in which I don't detail it with my own consciousness, it's an outpicturing of human consciousness. Okay? Human consciousness is doing the broad brushstrokes. I'm just fine-tuning it. But the fact is that it's an outpicturing of consciousness. There's no source out there. It's all an effect. So when you're thinking about supply, understand, if you can get that in your mind, then it will be clearer to you that supply can't possibly be income, because there's no source out there for it to come in from. Supply is outflow, and of course, when I'm putting it out, it's going out to me, because there's only the one, which is me, which is the one. I don't mean me, Lee, I mean the one consciousness. So outflow is what comes back to me. Yeah.
Did you think of this as cause and effect? If I have negative thinking and say, oh, whatever it is, I'm feeling negative about a person, place, or thing somewhere, and I'm exuding that, I'm going to get that back. Cause and effect. I'm causing it because I'm thinking it like a boomerang.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This has a lot to do with what karma is all about. If you, we always think about karma as material things bouncing off each other, but karma really works because there's only one. So what I do to you, I am doing to myself. And what I'm withholding from you, I am withholding from myself. Because there's really only one. When you're at the point where the whole thing is spiritual being expressed as materiality, then karma becomes obvious. So yeah, it certainly is. I mean, that's all effect, and it's what human consciousness expects, except insofar as I correct that with my own beliefs, and my own beliefs will override in the area of my experience, those areas in which I don't have a particular belief about. Why I'll get human consciousness belief if I don't take care of my own consciousness. In other words. Good. Need some notes here, trying to get this thing sorted into some sort of order, and I'm way off of it already, but it doesn't matter. At least I can go back there and see about completeness. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was thinking. If you have this consciousness and your husband doesn't, and, I'll say, well, that's always be enough, and, oh, look at these figures on me, how can that be enough? I mean, and I don't believe in that stuff. And so if I just continue to increase mine, I can, and then I thought too, if my supply comes because of that flow, won't it just go out his? I had a very similar question. I wrote down some of that. I said, so what if one is?
So let me answer hers first, and then I'll come to yours. All right. If you get your flow is from God through you and out, then there's no place in there for it to go out through Him. It's going out. That's where it's supposed to go. And you were thinking that with my supply consciousness, then what comes into me will go out through Him, but that's not what's happening. You're the source. You don't need Him for a source. He's not a source at all for you. You're your own source. But there is a reality that if you're in a partnership, the partnership will tend to function at the level of the lowest common denominator. It needn't be that way, and of course, as your consciousness raises, that will there's only one consciousness. So as your consciousness goes up, the consciousness goes up, and his will be raised too. But you will not be able to. I mean, the fact that you understand this very clearly doesn't mean it will make any sense to him at all. And it's not fair to ask him to operate in a way that he's fearful of. So that's a problem. And it's just one of those things that needs to be dealt with. I mean, worked out individually or lived with or whatever. There's not an answer to that. But it's not okay to impose your understanding on him, because it's not okay to ask him to come from fear. And what did you have, Linda?
Well, my issue was, what if you're in a relationship where one of you thinks there is enough and the other one thinks if there isn't enough, can you override the one who thinks there isn't enough? When you're thinking there is enough, override their thinking there isn't.
If your consciousness is really strong, then there can't not be enough for you. Okay?
So you're saying it won't matter where...
Well, it will matter because he's going to experience what his consciousness says. So it will matter. But your consciousness will express for you. Yeah, it's when you look at the partnership, when you look at the areas of partnership, that it becomes more muddled. And of course, some consciousnesses are stronger than others. When we get to spiritual healing, you'll understand that a strong consciousness can lift a weaker consciousness from where they are.
But being on Hannah's thing too, so if we're of the belief that there is enough, then our abundance will just be sort of kind of our life, and they all just take a benefit from it, but basically it's our...
They may or they may not benefit from it.
Yeah.
They may not be able to.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of the state that we want to get to. What state of consciousness do we want to get to? Jesus the ideal state is that if we're in the consciousness of I and my Father are one, if we're in the consciousness of knowing our oneness with God, then in that consciousness we're in a state of infinite supply. Because all there is then is God, and it's inconceivable that anything could be lacking to us. A slight step down from that is, again, Jesus saying, take no thought for tomorrow what you shall eat or what you shall drink or what you shall put on. Remember that one? And that sounds like, I've heard preachers in church from the pulpit say, of course that's not practical in this day and age. And I'm sure it was equally impractical in that day and age for the material consciousness. He goes on to say something like, keep your mind on God and all these other things will be added to you. Okay? If we are aware of who we are, then the whole question of material supply becomes irrelevant. Because we know who we are, and we're infinite consciousness, and we're indestructible, and we're eternal, and we're boundless joy and bliss and love, and infinitely fulfilled. And the whole issue doesn't come up when we're aware of our spiritual nature. And that consciousness is now the content of our consciousness, okay? And through this body, if we're still wearing a body, that will outpicture. And that will look like the right job showing up, and the right partner showing up, and the right friends showing up, and the right opportunity showing up, and the right house appearing, and the right car appearing, and the parking places showing up, and and everything working as if by magic, driving through town and all the lights go green just before you get there, you know, I mean, that's what you would outpicture if you were continually aware of your oneness with God, or continually aware of who you really are. So that's the ultimate supply consciousness. Fun picture. Mm-hmm.
What about if I have a period in my life of about 9 months where everything that could have gone wrong did. I lost a husband, I lost a car, somebody smashed into my car, I got a flat tire, I had a car stolen, I lost my home, all within like 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was that like something from like karma getting me back? I mean, or I had a terrible consciousness, or what? I mean, it was just a series of one event after another, and then everything was fine before and after that. It was pretty good. And then there was this 9 month period in my life that I was in hell. So what, I brought it on myself somehow, according to...
Well, certainly, if your consciousness could not have conceived of it, it could not have happened. I mean, I certainly can't tell you what happened, and that this much of it was consciousness, and this much of it was karma, and stuff like that, you know, the questions. But nothing can occur to you, nothing can happen to you that is not within your consciousness.
Could it be karma coming back, karma that I had made in previous life? So it was my turn
Supposedly.
to pay the piper, so to speak, for something I might have done before?
Supposedly, but if your consciousness were completely free, then there is no karma. If you're aware of your oneness with God, then karma disappears. Karma also is a concept in the material.
Those all could have been supplied too. She had a husband to give away, a house to give away, a car to give away.
I had a lot to do.
I get the sense that she wasn't thinking of it that way. No, and once it started, why then your consciousness and your fear of it probably propagated it.
Did you get any ideas?
What?
You know, what you're focused on, whether it's positively or negatively, is what you're focused on. I mean, if you're trying to avoid losing your house, your consciousness is all about losing your house. Losing your house is what's in your consciousness. And it might well result in losing your house. Whereas with everything else appearing the same, if you were concentrating on keeping your house, it might be an entirely different picture. You see, with nothing changed on the playing field at all, it's the half empty, half full. If you look at the glass and it's half empty, chances are it's going to get emptier. And if you look at the glass and it's half full, chances are it's filling up. You notice when you say the glass is half empty, it's because you're emptying it. And when you say the glass is half full, it's because somebody's filling it. You know, I mean, it does work that way. So, well, that's probably enough about that. Let's stop for a minute. So that's really the whole principles of supply, and that's why I say that we should talk about the spiritual nature of supply rather than the nature of spiritual supply. All supply is spiritual, all supply is an outpicturing of consciousness, and consciousness is what I mean by spiritual. And what we're talking about is whose consciousness is it not picturing of, and what's the content of the consciousness that it's not picturing of. The practice of supply, the practice that we want to do in order to change our outpicturing of supply. First of all, if you really get in your consciousness what's being said tonight, then it's no longer a question of having supply. It's a matter of being supply. And when you are supply, of course, there's no issue. The way we approach that is by paying attention, first of all, to what the content of this is regarding supply. The more we can come from a place of I am, or I can, or I have, the more we will be, or be able to do, or have. The focus is to come from a place of I can, I am, I have, I will. So that's one very important outlook to cultivate. The next one is one that Margaret Johnson, my friend in Atlanta, used to stress. It's most simply expressed as expect it. Expect good things, and they will happen because they're your consciousness. What you expect is what you believe in is what's likely to happen. So work on expecting good things. Just a second, I had a thought and I don't see how it relates, but it came in for some reason. Maybe it doesn't. Yeah, maybe it'll come up somewhere else. Another point that, as far as practicing supply, is in the Infinite Way, in Joel's teaching, they call it don't outline. Don't determine or say what you expect it to look like. I mean, if you, let's say you're looking for, you need to get out of your house and you're looking for a new place to live, expect a new place to live that will meet all of your needs and be fulfilling and joyful. But don't say, well, it's going to be a 4,000-foot house on the Strand, etc., etc. Because if you start saying what it's going to look like, you're limiting God. First of all, the first mistake there is that you're cutting him back to 4,000 square feet. He might have had 10,000 in mind. But second of all, the fact that you have a particular picture in mind may prevent your expression entirely, because the chances are you don't really believe that you're going to get this 4,000 square foot home on the Strand. What you can expect is that all of your needs will be met in a manner in which you will consider as fine and fulfilling and joyful and pretty and beautiful and really neat, and for one person it may be a beach cottage somewhere else and for somebody else it might be a cottage up in the mountains, and for somebody else it might be just a little lovely house with a garden somewhere, This apparently is what my consciousness outpictures as a place to live and teach in, okay? This house is an outpicturing of my consciousness. And I figure it's very nice that God threw in the view. But the fact is the flow is there, and my own consciousness and my own intellect knows what that means to me, and it is in those terms that it's met. It will not, if I love the mountains, I won't get the beach cottage, and if you love the beach, you won't get the mountain house. My consciousness is the one that determines. See, it's like God creates, okay? And mind outpictures it. And my particular consciousness, or human consciousness if I don't get in the way of it, but preferably my particular consciousness, determines what the picture looks like. The creativity happened long ago with God. Infinite, it's eternally infinite. And the nature of mind is to outpicture whatever is in consciousness, and it's my picture of it that outpictures. So, when I'm saying that I will be fulfilled, it means that my needs will be met. And my needs may be a lot less than yours, and so it may look really poor to you, but that has nothing to do with it. Or my needs may be a lot higher than yours, and so it may look extravagant to you. But the fact is that in the consciousness of my oneness with God, my needs will be met. The way to start this experience of supply, if you're in an experience of lack, is the one that Joel story I gave you is the key to, find something and give it away. Prime the pump, start the flow. Go through your closets. Find some clothes. Give it to Goodwill. Go through your garage. Pull out a bunch of stuff that you never use and give it to the club or Serenity House or somebody for the garage sale. And go through and find stuff that you don't know whether you're ever going to use it again or not. And throw that stuff on the pile. Not just the stuff that you know you'll never use, but now let's go a little step further. Let's now look at stuff, well, I haven't used it in 5 years. Let's throw all the stuff I haven't used in 5 years on the stack, okay? And start giving. Start putting it out there. Just start the flow. And one classic way that's been around for thousands of years as a practice is tithing. And tithing is a real good way to develop the spiritual consciousness. And everybody thinks of tithing as giving 10%, and it needn't be 10%. Tithing is the practice of giving some of what you have to those places that nurture you, like your source for spiritual teaching, your church, or to places that you feel like supporting. There are.
To your son.
Huh?
To your son?
No, not to your family, not to relations. That's your duty. That's not a tithe. That's not from the overflowing. No,
So starting like an education fund and everything
nope. Yeah, I have some money for my granddaughter's college, and that has nothing to do with tithing, even though I'm not obligated to get my granddaughter to college. Still, that's family, and that's something else. No, tithing is to something impersonal, you know, and you'll just have to feel about it, and you'll know what's right. I mean, giving it to your church is right. Disciples support their gurus. Zen monks support Zen masters. People support their churches. And also, you know, supporting the Red Cross might be a good place to do it, or supporting Alcoholics Anonymous, because this is a spiritual place that has nurtured you. Giving money to Alcoholics Anonymous, tithing in any area like that, but it's got to be impersonal. It's not something that directly affects you personally. It affects the multitudes. If you were to put the money, instead of giving the money to your son to go to college, if you were to put that in a college fund, which would then be given to whoever needed it most to go to college, and your son happened to be one of the 150 people that were in that pool, that would be entirely different, you see? But giving money to your kid to go to college is something mothers do. Or not. Yeah.
What about kind of a step beyond the tithing part of questioning whether it will, like, just giving freely to, like, I get to a couple different things that support me, like you said. Sometimes I question whether the funds will be appropriated right, going directly to the source as opposed to administration or other things like that. And then sometimes it takes me away from the giving itself. What are your feelings on that?
If it's a gift, it's none of your business how it's spent.
Okay.
Decide that before you give, rather than worrying about it afterwards.
Okay.
I mean, everybody has administrative overhead, and you know, and you've got to decide what you like and what you don't like beforehand. In any event, back to tithing. The practice is, let's suppose we're going to do it monthly. The practice is the first check you write every month is your tithe. Okay? Not a matter of whether we have enough. Wait to see if there's enough to do that. Your first check is your tithe. And you're not giving it because they need it so much as you're giving it because you can, because I can. It's the overflow of my bounty that I'm sharing, that I'm spreading around. Okay, do you see that attitude? It's not a begrudging thing, or I'm taking care of this person or that person, or I'm, you know, doesn't matter whether they need it or not. What matters is that you can, and this is a place that you would like to share your overflow with. The traditional biblical figure is 10%, and but I would say instead, much more reasonable. Well, 10% is fine if that's what's comfortable with you, but I would suggest start wherever it is comfortable. Start with something you can do, and find out how easy and how much fun it is. And you might start with 2. It's like I say with meditation. Start with 2 or 3 minutes. And I'll never tell you to go to 5. It will tell you to go to 5. So start with 2 or 3% or 5% or 4% or whatever feels right. And see how good that feels. And notice that your standard of living doesn't change at all, or it may increase. It may, in fact, you may discover that money coming from places you hadn't imagined before and stuff like that as your supply grows. I sponsored one lady, and we talked about this forever, and she finally said, well, God damn it, I'll do it, you know, and she gave $20 to some alcoholic recovery house or something, you know, and got an $8,000 a year raise the next week that was unexpected by anybody. So she became a believer. Now, I don't claim that the two are connected in any way, but the timing is very interesting, isn't it? Questions?
Is there steps in between taking that leap of faith that, well, if you're still in the belief that you give it away, then you've lost that, you're not going to get it back, or you give it away because you think, oh, I'm going to get twice as much back, you're still thinking you're going to get something back from it. Is there a step in between that? Because I can't go out and give 20 and think I'm going to get, I'll still be in the consciousness of what am I going to get back, or so it's not the right reason, so then you just then I stay stuck where I'm at. Just meditate.
No, the first step is if you meditate enough, all of this will be absolutely irrelevant. No, the answer is give the amount that you can give freely and without concern and without any worry about getting it back or anything. Give the amount that you can give because you have it. Okay? And with the curiosity, see what happens. And, to see what that feels like and to see what happens in your life. But it's coming from the position of that I can. And that's why I say you can start, if you don't want to start with money, you can start with going through your clothes and stuff like that, looking for stuff that you have that you really don't need, Work up to it. The fact is that, 2% will start feeling pretty cheap. And you'll go, after a while, it'll just feel like nothing to you. And then you'll get maybe I should go to 5%, And after a while, 5% will just feel like nothing to you. And you'll think, well, and it may keep growing and growing, who knows. But it will always, the point is that this is the abundance. This is the fruitage. This is the overflow. The whole thing is overflow. We don't ever have to give anything of ourselves that hurts. If we can always just give the overflow. And what happens is that the overflow starts overflowing more. The overflow starts overflowing more. And all of a sudden there's a gush of overflow. Okay? But we don't need to be afraid, we don't need to be fearful, and we don't need to, because that's the lack consciousness, and we're trying to avoid that. And yet we need to get the pump primed. We need to have the experience that the supply is supply. We need to learn what supply is. We need to get it in our consciousness. It's not from getting, and the idea of giving in order that you get, is that's not the right approach. But it's certainly better to do it that way than to not do it at all, because at least you're getting some experience. It doesn't hurt to put a carrot in front of the donkey. Yeah.
My husband wants to write my tithing off on the taxes, and I got uncomfortable with that. I wanted to know what your experience was.
Now that's a funny one. Meg Johnson absolutely swears that you should tithe 10% gross and not write it off on your taxes. And for years I thought that was silly. That whether it's 10% of the growth or 10% of the net is just the next step up. But not writing it off on your taxes, I thought, if I write it off on my taxes, then I can give more. Mm-hmm. How's that for a lack consciousness? Huh? Whoops. if I have to worry about writing it off or not, then I'm not in the pure supply consciousness. Then I'm concerned, then it's not overflow apparently. I don't think it makes any difference whether you write it off or not. You know, the question is whether you think you need to. And the only way to find out whether you think you need to is not. You see the catch? You see the catch in there? Let's see if there's anything else that feels like that's it. Yeah, there's one other little point here that I sort of like. Really get into the consciousness that there's only one. Keep that in your mind when you're measuring what you're about to do. Keep in mind that you're doing it to yourself. You're doing it to the one. Another expression of the one, but the one. You know, it's like from one pocket to the other. And that certainly makes being generous easier because you're giving to yourself. And that's a karmic expression will happen there. It does come back. But the other thing to keep in mind is that if you're withholding from somebody, you're withholding from yourself. So if you are refusing to pay a bill, it would not surprise you to find that people are unable to pay you money they owe you because you're withholding, and that too will be reflected. So when you're dealing with supply, keep in mind the oneness of it all and use that as your yardstick. Yeah.
When Robert talks about when people first work with him, he said a lot of people have lost everything. How does that fit with the spiritual nature of supply? He often says, expect things to get worse, and people lose their homes, and things get really, all their attachments get just taken away.
When you're in a consciousness like Robert's, everything gets stirred up and gets brought up to be discarded. And if those were things that people were clinging to, and that's not really a supply issue there. What it is it's a matter of attachment. If those were things to which the person was attached, then in a consciousness like Robert's, you're likely to get stripped of them, which is a gift.
That's not supply.
That's not supply. No, yeah. Supply is, when we're talking about supply, and we're talking about lovely spiritual supply, but we're talking about it in this experience. And Robert is not talking about this experience at all. Robert is talking about something that is beyond metaphysics, and he's talking about finding out who you really are. So it's a whole different, Robert's at a whole other step up from discussing metaphysics. We talk about the nature of mind, and we talk about supply, and we talked about healing for people that are doing some advanced work, and like this group is doing. And the reason, and we do the script work and the kid work, and we do the relationship work, and we do all this work. And the reason we do all this work is so that we can be comfortable in this experience, so that we can get quiet. As long as we've got supply issues and we've got lack going on and we're sick and we've got relationships in our face and people screaming at us and us throwing tantrums and all that, as long as our life is a zoo, we're never going to find out who we really are. Because the way you find out who you really are is when everything stops and your whole being is totally silent. And you can't get there. And you have to work towards that a long time, and you can't do that work, if you're not reasonably comfortable. So this stuff is an important step towards that experience. Just like we do 9 steps before we do 10, 11, and 12. We do 9 steps to clean up the ship, and we do 10th step to keep it clean so that we can begin doing the 11th step. Okay? And the 12th step is about supply, about sharing what we have. And that's where the joy is, by the way. The joy is all in the 12th step. There's no fun doing the first 9 steps. They're work. And the 10th step is sort of a pain. And the 11th step is uplifting. And we get high doing the 11th step. And then the 12th step is where the joy is, giving it away. Let's be quiet a minute. Any more questions? Comments? Yeah.
Okay, if I buy a new car and I look at the budget and see that there's not enough I guess that's the human concept, so there's not enough. So I think, I gotta get more work, get more money to buy the new car. What would be the spiritual consciousness? I know that one.
This is always a very hard question. No, it really is. If you had done the spiritual work, then the reality would be to go inside and see whether or not you needed that car. And if you did, go ahead and get it. And the wherewithal would be provided. But if you haven't done the work, then it would be a mistake to act as if you had. In other words, you have to come from the level of consciousness that you're at. So it might be wise to practice tithing and get that other job. You have to evaluate where you're at. And you don't know until you try it, but the fact is that your needs will be met if you expect them to be met. I remember seven, 8 years ago when I bought this house. And I got together the down payment on this house. I didn't buy this house. I got together the down payment on this house, and I was the vice president of engineering over at a computer company in El Segundo. And about 6 months after I bought this place, I went in there and they were asking me to do some stuff that was just absolutely unacceptable to me. And there was no way that I could stay with the company. And so I left the company, having just bought the house. And of course I was earning a lot of money over there, and I wasn't going to earn very much anywhere else. And this was the first time that I really got to check my supply consciousness and to see what that was all about. And so I knew what I had to do, and so I did it. And I discovered that there wasn't any anxiety about it. I sat there wondering what was going to happen and how this was going to get taken care of. And it's the same as my attitude is today. Today I don't have work, and I look at this house, and my attitude is one of finding out whether or not this house is necessary for my work. If it is, God will find a way to pay the mortgage. If it isn't, I mean, if the mortgage stops getting paid, then it's no longer necessary in my life. In any event, at the time, I had just bought the house, and we were just starting to do some classes here, and so I sat there watching to see what would happen. And it was less than 6 months later that the same guy, the president of that company, hired me as a consultant to sit here in my office upstairs looking out at the ocean, working 6 hours a day instead of the 14 they wanted from me, doing my own project, doing the stuff that I hired in to do with that company originally rather than being vice president, and doing the stuff I love to do, and delivering it to him without any requirement to even present it to customers, let alone lie to them. And my payment turned out to be just slightly more than I was making as vice president over there. And I looked at that and said, okay, I guess we're supposed to do this work here for a while. And that's where I am today. Apparently we're still supposed to do the work here, and when there's no more money to pay the mortgage, then we move on to whatever's next, you know. But I'm absolutely certain that my needs will be met, my life will be comfortable, and that whatever work it is that I'm supposed to do, everything that's necessary for that will be provided. Because it's not possible not to be. Okay? And that's supply consciousness. So sometimes you take the step out and find out. But Robert also tells a story about a guy asked Robert. Robert had said in one of his satsangs, he said, I never lock my car, I never lock my house. And this guy who was a salesman heard that, and next week he went out and he didn't lock his car and came back out to it, and all the samples had been stolen. And he came back to Robert, and he said, I thought you said you never have to lock your car and everything. And Robert says, yeah, I didn't say you didn't have to lock your car. So the point is, know where your consciousness is. It was impossible to steal from Robert because he didn't think he owned anything, so nobody could possibly take anything from him. But this guy thought he had these shirts, that he had sample shirts in his car, you know, and somebody else did too. Okay, so you got to come from where you're at. You have to correctly evaluate where you're at and come from there.
Yeah, it's kind of been where I've been just watching. You know, I put the word out that I could take more work on, and then I got offered a bunch of jobs, but they weren't what I could do. And I thought it was kind of funny how I get a little, oh, okay, I got this, and then, no, I couldn't do that, and then this whole other thing opened up where I'm doing stuff that I'm not getting paid. And I go, this is all really interesting. I wonder where it's leading me, and I'm just kind of going.
That's
and
right.
I got a picture of the car on the refrigerator, our dream car that we're expecting to get, and I'm just kind of watching.
Cool.
So,
Watch
and I'm
what
tithing. And,
yeah, watch what's happening.
okay, so it's just, you know, you want to get results sometimes. All right, now what is it?
Well, you are getting results. They're just not the results you're looking for. You're getting all these other areas you're putting stuff out in. That may be the results. If a couple more points on this. I was talking with Margaret. She was one of Joel's students, and we were talking about supply. And she said that she had a problem with supply, and Joel insisted, you know, Joel taught in various places all around the country and all around the world, and a lot of his close students would travel to, like she lived in Atlanta, and she would travel to Chicago for the Chicago class or to New York for the New York class, and Joel told her to fly to the next class. He wanted to see her in the next class, and he insisted that she fly first class. And the point being that you're about to be an infinite way teacher, and you should be demonstrating supply. So demonstrate it. You know, fly first class. Okay. So there was a step up for her. And another thing that comes up that I know is true is, if you wait until you have enough money to go to Europe, chances are you'll never go to Europe. So what you do is you make plans to go to Europe and expect the money to be provided. God does not provide until you create the vacuum. God's not going to just drop money on the table for which you have no need. So if you're confident, get the car. Watch where the money comes from. If that's scary to you, get a job.
My friends already told me to do that. I'm scared.
If that's scary to you, then get a job.
Okay.
I will quote my biker friend Andy Grove, who's got a very clear understanding of supply. He says, whenever I want money, he says, I pray for it. He says, and God gives it to me, generally on payday. Let's leave it there. Thank you.